Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to introduce a group of staff. It's a team from the University of South Dakota and their partners that worked on a project as our second pilot grantee presentation in the seminar series this spring. So excited to hear their results today and where they're going in the future. And we've got a whole team of 6 that will introduce themselves as they come up. But it's my honor to introduce Dr. Bruce Vogt. He has his medical degree that he got from the University of Nebraska College of Medicine and has had a long-standing career with the University of South Dakota, and recently retired in June as the chair of the Department of Family Medicine, but is still holding several positions and titles there as they won't let him go, which I'm not really surprised about. So he's still doing active teaching and administrative roles there, and is one of our wonderful principal investigators on this project, and we're so excited to hear from his team today. So if you will join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Bruce Vogt.
Thank you very much. I'm told that we're supposed to stand behind the podium here since it's being videotaped, so we'll try to do that. We're happy to be here today, and as Danielle said, all of my colleagues are here with us, and you'll hear from all of them today. They'll introduce themselves as they come up. Our project is titled Assessing the Impact of Lay Patient Advocate Training in Tribal Communities. And we want to thank CRCAIH and Sanford Health and certainly the NIH for their support of this project so we could carry it out. And it's, as Danielle hinted at, this is a collaborative project of not only the USD Sanford School of Medicine, but the USD School of Health Sciences, and in particular, the Departments of Social Work and Department of Undergraduate Health Sciences, and then an important partner, the South Dakota Association for Lifelong Learning, the Adult Educators Group in the state, and then the CRCAIH program. I have just a few slides on background as was requested. I'm not going to spend much time on this at all because you know this information, but it does provide some foundation for our project. Health literacy is obviously a key factor for effective patient advocacy and of the social determinants of health. And Healthy People 2000 define it as the degree to which individuals have the capacity to obtain, process, and understand basic health information and services needed to make appropriate health decisions. I think the important thing to realize is it's not just about knowledge, but it's about motivation and activation as well. Coulter and Ellis, in their paper in 2006, said that health literacy is fundamental to patient engagement. If one doesn't speak the language, in this case health literacy, one's not going to be able to be a very good patient self-advocate. And the problem is even greater, as you know, in minorities and in underserved populations. In the case of adult American Indians and Black Americans, the rate's twice as high as far as being health illiterate compared to the white peers. And in the case of the Hispanic population, it's about 3 times. Those are from Andrulis and Brock in 2007. As far as closer to home here, we know that 86% of American Indian students entering the adult education system have basic academic skills lower than the 9th grade. And that's from a South Dakota health study. And it's even, the lack of health literacy is even a greater barrier. As we were pondering submitting a grant application to CRCAIH, we obviously wanted to review the literature, and we learned or confirmed some important facts. And again, Coulter and Ellis in 2006 said that it was important that we establish the most effective ways of delivering health information and education, particularly to those with low literacy and to hard-to-reach and disadvantaged groups. Nutbeam in 2008 said the research base surrounding health literacy is a personal asset and rooted in health promotion, adult education theory, and literacy is not well developed. And recommended that research using more personal forms of communication and community-based educational programs, which is what we did, was important. And we learned that there's very little information in health information regarding interventions among American Indian populations. And so as we considered that and put our project together, and the project we conceived, we believe, helped address some of these issues, looked at some of these research gaps, and believe what we found was, and what we did was significant in that we assessed a new community-based method of delivering a healthcare literacy intervention with tribal communities, and we'll obviously talk more about that, assessed a novel evaluation model combining measures of behavioral intention and patient activation to project the impact of training intervention. And then finally, we utilized adult education specialists to develop the curriculum. So we had not only the health care and health science professionals to develop content areas, but then we had the expertise of adult educators to actually deliver the information. So our project really had three themes. The first was to develop a health literacy self-advocacy training curriculum for laypersons in adult Indian communities, to deliver the training curriculum via classroom integration in pilot community adult education programs, and to deploy a novel evaluation model to assess the training curriculum and its impact on patient activation. Rather than creating another centralized service organization to try to help address the issues, our emphasis and we invested in individuals in the community. And we also saw and know that those individuals within the community are going to be not only advocates for themselves, but advocates for family. And then an even greater goal is that the hope that by improving advocacy, it will be extended as well to the extended family unit, the American Indian community. So that's really what our project is about. And at this point, I think I'll introduce Cassidy, Dr. Cassidy Gutierrez, or Dr. J. Memmott, who's going to talk about the curriculum.
And Jay can stand behind the podium.
Okay, I'll be the prop. I might say that, and the winners of the Academy Award are.
Is that okay if just one?
Yeah. Good. And you have the clicker. Okay. Basically, what we did is we approached the curriculum from the standpoint we wanted it to be culture sensitive. So we initially formed a curriculum committee, and we had input not only from educators within the School of Health Sciences, but then we also had American Indians, Native Americans who were involved with the curriculum development. And Cassidy can talk a little bit more about how our curriculum evolved as we began to test it out and look at the actual delivery of that. We had the American Indian Advisory Board that I just mentioned, and we initially started off with 5 modules but ended up with 4. And these modules include becoming an advocate, which in some ways is counterintuitive, I think, to Native American culture, because the notion of the collective and not necessarily standing out as an individual, that the concept of advocating for oneself or someone else is at odds with that kind of idea. So we wanted to approach it from a standpoint that we would able to fit that into the culture, and I think we were. The second thing was just looking at medication administration and prescription drugs, how to read a prescription, how to read labels on a prescription, that type of thing. The third one had to do with maintaining your balance, and in this case the emphasis was on healthy eating. And then the fourth one was maintaining your balanced physical activity. We have another module that we have not implemented, and we had quite a bit of discussion about the notion of mental health. And that concept is highly stigmatized in Native American culture. So we decided to not address that particular issue, but approach it from the standpoint of balance, which was really a concept that's central to the medicine wheel. So that is the curriculum, and I think that now we're going to have Becky Lemke talk about the South Dakota Association of Lifelong Learning, because this was a very, very important component of our program in implementing it, was to use a naturally existing network of folks to deliver the curriculum.
Thank you, Jay. My name is Becky Lemke, and I am the current president of the South Dakota Association for Lifelong Learning, South Dakota ALL for short. We are the professional association for adult educators in the state of South Dakota. Currently, we have 67 members, which I'm going to say is about 90% of the total adult educators in our state, and we have 13 organizations who have members in our association. Those organizations come not only from tribal communities, but also Department of Corrections, school districts and technical schools like Southeast Tech here in Sioux Falls, and then community-based organizations as well. Our mission at South Dakota ALL is to promote and provide professional growth and development opportunities for adult educators in our state. We were formed in 1966, so we've been around for a while. We're upcoming on our 50th anniversary. My term as president will be done before that time. And one of the reasons this partnership worked so well is because we have people on the ground in these tribal communities already, providing adult education services to the population in question. We provide literacy and numeracy instruction, GED preparation classes, and English language skills to non-native speakers of English in the communities that we serve. Our instructors come from many backgrounds. There's a small percentage of adult education instructors with any formal science training beyond what you would have to take as general ed requirements to get a teaching certification. You're actually not required to be a certified teacher to work in the adult education field in the state of South Dakota. The majority of South Dakota's teachers are certified, but it is not a requirement. We also have a lot of part-time teachers, and that leads to little planning time and little time for writing curricula. And that's one of the reasons this partnership was so appealing to our organization. We got to access expert curriculum writers in the field of health literacy, which is a huge concern in adult education as well as healthcare, to provide us with a high-quality curriculum that our instructors could take and use with the students who are already coming to their classes. And it was appealing, I think, to our partners because we have a group of students in a student pool already coming to access those education services. We had students coming to classes, we had qualified teachers teaching them, and those students and teachers had a well-established relationship of trust with one another, which I think was important in the participation that we actually managed to accomplish within the grant cycle and the research cycle. I want to say one more thing about our pool of students, and Dr. Vogt referenced this earlier, but I pulled some more recent statistics from the state of South Dakota. The ones Dr. Vogt referenced were from 2013, but just to show you that these things do stay fairly consistent in our field. Our mid-year data for our current fiscal year, this was pulled December 2014, shows 85% of total adult education students in the state of South Dakota with skills below a 9th grade level in literacy or numeracy. 19% of those students are American Indian students. And of those American Indian students, 80% are operating below the 9th grade level when they enter our programs. So I think that just speaks again to the need for a high quality intervention for these students that they're able to access within the existing framework of a program that they're already coming to and comfortable in. I have to just add one more note. This partnership has worked so well because our research team was so open to listening to our suggestions from our teachers in the field about what kinds of language could be used on some of the data gathering tools and as far as listening to the curriculum. I know Cassidy and Jay were very receptive to our adult educators who reviewed the curriculum and gave them suggestions. They made changes based on those suggestions, and I think that lent to the credibility and to the response of our educators and our students in South Dakota. I'm going to turn it over now to our lead researcher, I believe. Oh, Cassidy, are you going to talk more about the curriculum? I'll give it back to Cassidy.
Thanks, Becky. All right, so we went out and we had the curriculum committee last fall, so fall 2013, and designed the curriculum, which essentially was initially 5 models, as Dr. Memmott mentioned. And then implementation took place in December and January, December 2013 and January 2014. And so implementation of the curriculum, I went out as a train the trainer and had some assistance. Wyatt Pickner, whom works here at Stanford Research, also went with to assist with the training for at Sisseton Wahpeton, Iot. And we also had enemy swim in that training. We also trained Eagle Butte in December. And then I trained at the Oglala Lakota College in Martin, South Dakota in January. And one of the nice things about the curriculum was that we were able to get input. A lot of the conversation we had out there while doing the curriculum implementation was very informal, and getting input from those that we were training about what would you change or what are some recommendations you have for the curriculum. So it was really a living, breathing curriculum that we were willing to modify after that initial training. And so we came back with a lot of valuable information about what we could change to make it more relevant for those specific communities and more culturally appropriate, and made further modifications. And that's one reason we parted down from 5 modules to 4. And I think that Dr. Geiger is going to talk about some of the outcomes related to that, but that was something that they had suggested. Another element with the curriculum is that it was some basic items giving them guidance so that they wouldn't have to spend a lot of additional time pulling resources and prepping, but it allowed them to interject and have that freedom to deliver as they saw fit, and also to bring in other components. For example, when I was out there, some groups said, oh, this will be during this particular module, it'll be a great opportunity to have our wellness center come in and do BMI testing, height, weight, other measurements, or we can go over to the wellness center. So they were kind of interjecting additional activities that they wanted to incorporate. And I'm just going to talk briefly about maybe some of the challenges that we incurred, and I'm sure that might come up during some of the methodology also. I think I was impressed with the training, but one thing I will say is that training at one site one day is not going to be the same as what it's going to be at another site another day. So there's really not a one-size-fits-all, and I thought that I can give credit to Wyatt, my partner in crime on those days, on that tour through South Dakota that we took, that he was prepping me for that, to set aside maybe my formal methods of standing up here and presenting, and taking a very informal approach with each group, and just being prepared for the dynamics to be different each day and each training session. And I think this is timely to transition maybe into the methodology.
My name is Jared Geiger, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of South Dakota Department of Social Work. And I'm going to talk about the methodology today. Just a little background. Our goal obviously was, or one of our goals, was to create a curriculum and deliver it via pre-existing structure, i.e. South Dakota older adults, or adult education, I'm sorry. And, in order to do that, we needed to be guided by some type of theoretical framework or conceptual framework. And for this project, our approach was really guided by the theory of reasoned action. And this looks at a couple things. It looks at a person's beliefs, their attitudes towards something, their intention or their behavioral intention, and their actual behavior. From the theory of reasoned action evolved what's called the technology acceptance model, and this was developed by Davis, and I use this model in most of my research that I use. And essentially this model, it talks about, or this model emerged from the 80s in 1986, looking specifically at how can people, or to what extent do individuals accept at that time in 86 a computer? this novel new thing that's as big as, it's probably as big as this podium back in '86. But how do we get people to accept this technology? And when Jason approached me early on about this grant, and we were just brainstorming, it got me thinking about this model that I use and how conceptually it really does make sense. The technology acceptance model focuses on a couple key variables or concepts. And the first variable and concept is perceived usefulness. The second is perceived ease of use, and it also looks at behavioral intention. So if you think about it, the model emerged from this very fundamental belief. So I've got this wonderful technology here. If I perceive it to be useful, I'm more likely to use this. If I perceive this to be easy to use, I'm more likely to use it. If I, considering my ease of use and usefulness, intend to use this in the future, I'm probably going to do that and continue to keep using it in the future. So conceptually, that really guided this methodology. That it got me thinking that, well, really the technology acceptance model is focusing on an object or a technology. Is it possible that we could adapt this model to look at a person's acceptance toward a curriculum? And from that, our internal conversations and conversations with our community advisory boards really emerged our survey methodology. So what I'm going to talk about today are really four main variables. Perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use, and behavioral intention to use the curriculum that that was developed by Jay and Cassidy. The other piece, which was our outcome variable, is we were interested in looking at patient activation. Dr. Vogt spoke about that earlier in his presentation. That and I'm paraphrasing, but it's insufficient for people to just have higher levels of education. That's important, but to be activated is the next step. I need to lose weight. I have a treadmill at home. It has all my dry cleaning on it. I'm not using it. So I have this wonderful technology, this wonderful thing that can help me improve my quality of life, but I don't, it's easy to use, it's useful, but I don't intend to use it. So this kind of thinking really, again, guided our curriculum and our rollout, in the sense that we also wanted to know what's the resident, or what our participants, our population, to what extent they thought the curriculum was useful, easy to use, and if they intended to use it. And if it actually, this curriculum training would also increase patient activation. So if an individual has low patient activation, that person would be an individual that doesn't ask a lot of questions. That individual perhaps doesn't know the medications that he or she are taking. That individual doesn't even know the name of his or her doctors, so on and so forth. The other end of the spectrum, a person with high patient activation, is someone that's very engaged, that asks questions with their physician or healthcare provider without being prompted. That individual is very familiar with the medications that he or she are taking, understands exactly why he or she are taking them, potential side effects, risks, benefits. So that just gives you a spectrum of this patient activation. Again, this was, I think, the beauty of this project was our delivery framework, and I think of this as the vehicle that helped us achieve our dose, or how we delivered our dose. The dose in this particular project is our curriculum, or our lay curriculum model that we used. And again, it was really informed by this community-based participatory research approach. And really the main goal of this CBPR approach is collaborating and working with individuals and seeing them as partners, and with the goal being that we wanted to form a relationship and bridge the gap between research and boots on the ground, research and what's happening in the field, and work with individuals so that they could see us as a partner and to bridge that gap, and quite frankly, improve the capacity of the individuals that we're working with to be champions for their own health, to really focus on their own disease management and illness management. So again, as my colleagues noted before, we had a community advisory board, we had adult education leaders, and we had this really iterative process. So we had 3 or 4 different versions of the survey that we used. We made modifications each time to the survey to make sure that it was friendly, easy to use, to demonstrate some basic face and content validity as well. So there was a lot of upfront work, but I think what you're going to see in the near future will really demonstrate the fruits of that labor. So the hypothesis and really the research questions guiding this project were, does our adapted model, can it predict patient activation based on a person's, to what extent they perceive the curriculum to be useful, easy to use, and if they intend to use it in the future? Does that have an increase in patient activation? And the other piece was really looking at the growth or the rate of change of activation over the course of our study. In terms of the cadence of our study, we had a baseline where we measured patient activation, where we measured usefulness, ease of use, behavioral intention toward the curriculum. And then we delivered the intervention over the course of approximately 4 weeks. We did a post-test follow-up on the same measures, and then we followed up again 30 days afterwards. So from pre-test to follow-up, there was a 60 days. Again, just to highlight the robustness of our methodology approach is that we had three repeated measures using validated scales. And the existing health literacy materials were in the public domain, so a lot of them, and I'll defer back to Cassidy and Jay to talk more about that, but these are existing health literacy and health information materials from the CDC and other organizations. So again, I talked about the main constructs that we looked at, patient activation and then technology acceptance. So now I'm going to transition to the participants here. Again, as Becky noted before, our participant pool was derived from individuals attending services or receiving services from the adult education centers. And we had various pilot sites. Obviously, we went through the informed consents and described the study in detail. We did offer some incentives for participation. Again, here it indicates that we did a follow-up at 90 days. Through our advisory boards, it was recommended that we move the 90-day up to 60 days, and that was largely because of some logistical issues and perhaps the transitory nature of some of the participants in the study in terms of attending the adult education services. So although this says 90 days here, it was at 0, 30, and 60 days. But there were incentives at each of those points. All right, so on to the findings. So here I'm just going to briefly talk about some select descriptives and frequency statistics, just talk about the intercorrelations of the major constructs that we used. And then we ended up doing a hierarchical regression and then ultimately an individual growth model. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some anecdotal data that we have as well that'll provide additional context for what we did in this study and what we found. So our total sample was 220 subjects. And the average age was approximately mid-30s. And their average level of patient activation was 62. So patient activation ranges from 0 to 100. So a person that's at 50 is neither activated or neither deactivated, for lack of a better word. Obviously, higher activation, the better. Behavioral intention, usefulness, and ease of use, that's on a 1 to 5 scale. Obviously, a 3 is they find the curriculum neither useful or useful. They either intend to use the information or don't intend to use it. That's a 3. So the 5 is this person is extremely likely to use this technology in the future. They perceive this technology to be extremely useful, extremely easy to use, and 1 is on the other end of the spectrum. Okay. Again, our gender breakdown, we had more females than males. And again, some other sociodemographic information here. This, I think, is really interesting, this data point here, which was leading, which we had some discussions in some of our earlier meetings today, that's about 36% of the sample were unemployed, but they're actively looking for employment. So as we talk about next steps, that's a theme that we'll probably touch on moving forward. And obviously, due to the nature of the funding mechanism, 94% of the sample indicated as American Indian, and we had 3 individuals that indicated that their primary race was Caucasian. Again, and the education breakdown there, the majority were at or around that 12th grade, no diploma. So you could see that we had a few individuals that had some higher education, but by and large, the individuals were right at around that 12th grade or GED equivalent. So in terms of our variables here, again, the patient activation, that's to what extent a patient is activated in their own health. We saw some pretty significant or statistically significant or relationships here. So there's a strong relationship between behavioral intention and activation, usefulness and activation, and ease of use and activation. And clearly you can see here that the highest correlation coefficient is ease of use. So the higher a person perceive, or the more a person perceived the curriculum to be easy to use, the higher level of patient activation that they had. These are really the main findings as it's related to our outcome variable. Behavioral, the intercorrelations between behavioral intention, perceived usefulness, and perceived ease of use. These correlations, these are expected. That's what the model typically says. It's interesting that this model still holds for a completely different population from what the theory of reasoned action in TAM was developed. So this is interesting in and of itself, but really the main pieces here that I think are most interesting are the variables, ease of use, and the relationship it has with PAM. So again, the first analysis that we ran was just looking at, does this adapted model, can it reasonably predict patient activation? So there were 3 steps to this model. The first step, we included basic control variables, or socio-demographic, if you will, age and gender. And then the next step, we added perceived usefulness and ease of use. And that's just based on the theoretical foundation that these are the 2 of the biggest predictors of intention. So we put them in at the second level. Okay? And as you can see here, I want to direct your attention, and actually this is a little off, I should have put this down more, but the statistically significant predictor here, the statistically significant beta weight, is perceived ease of use. So again, the beta weight for perceived ease of use was 0.31. So again, that's showing a pretty significant predictive ability of ease of use. So the more people perceive the curriculum as easy to use, the higher level of activation we would see. And conversely, the lower level of patient activation, or I'm sorry, the lower level of ease of use, the lower level of patient activation we would see. The third step is where we really entered in behavioral activation to the model. And again, you could see that the significant predictors here, again, were ease of use and behavioral intention. And again, the biggest predictor so far are in our findings, our preliminary findings, I should say, are perceived ease of use. And again, it really conceptually makes sense. If you believe something to be easy to use, you're more likely to use it on average. So this really kind of confirmed what we hoped we would see. It's just nice to have some data to back that up. And overall, the model predicted about 13% of the variance of the outcome variable, which is using Cohen's effect size as a medium effect size, at or around a medium effect size. Interestingly enough, although I'm not reporting, we're not going to be showing the results here, is that I did run a few other analyses afterwards because I was really excited this model held, and I actually ran an SEM where I switched the patient activation to as a predictor variable. And it ended up predicting about 36% of behavioral intention, which is really extraordinary because this model, the technology acceptance model, historically meta-analysis have shown that it predicts about 40 to 60% of intention. So when we move the variable from patient activation from an outcome to a predictor variable, again, we saw that model hold approximately what we would expect in that approximately 40 to 60% of intention or likely use of an object or likely use of a curriculum in this particular study. So I hesitate giving that anecdotal information without having data to back that up. But it is real, and we're going to be writing that up. But it's interesting that the model actually held, and I think that's fascinating moving forward. So the second piece of the study was really looking at the growth, the rate of change over time. You may not be able to see this for those of you that are webcasting in, but patient activation is on the x-axis is the time measurements. And you could see on average there was a growth of patient activation. So over time, our 220 subjects had a statistically significant increase in patient activation. So at baseline, this is where they started. Post-test, this is where they were at. And follow-up, this is where they were at. So in terms of numbers, time was a significant predictor. It was statistically significant over time, and it was a statistically significant linear trend. I did test a second-order polynomial, and there wasn't any quadratic trend in the data, or statistically significant data, trend. So there was a statistically significant linear trend. So over time, there was an increase of 2.4 points of patient activation over measure. And again, this is approximation. The next piece of the growth model was really looking at each individual as themselves, for lack of a better word, or looking at the individual intercept and slope. And I treated these as random effects. And in this finding, we see that, don't worry about the verb or the parameter values here, but essentially that we found that there were statistically significant variances among the baselines of individuals at their starting point. So essentially that's just saying that on average there were statistically significant starting points among our 220 individuals, and you'll see this in the next slide. We also found that the growth and the rate of change, or the slope, was statistically significantly different among the population, or among the participants as well. So it's saying that everyone's starting point was different, and everyone grew at an approximately different level, on an individual level. And then we also tested the covariance between the slope and the intercept, and that was statistically not significant. But the main things, I think, of this first one is that there was variances among the starting points and variances among the slope. Okay? So with 220 subjects, I couldn't actually do a scatter plots because you wouldn't be able to read it because there's so many lines. So I did a subsample of 10 subjects out of our sample. And you could see again some of the participants on average, they were trending up from lower patient activation to higher. There were a few that went down, but by and large, participants were increasing their patient activation over time. So imagine this with 220 lines in it. Okay. Again, here this is just a subsample of the average person growth. Okay. So. The interesting piece here is that our anecdotal information. Do you want me to go into this, Jason? Do you want to say no? So the interesting piece, and just to summarize, is that the model seemed to held well. The biggest predictor of activation ended up being ease of use, that the participants perceived the technology to be easy to use. And also there was a statistically significant increase in patient activation from pre-test to post-test, and that everyone started at a different location at baseline, and that everyone's growth was on average approximately different. There are different rates of change. As you can see some of the anecdotal data, one participant said, advocate training is something that our reservation is lacking. Many of our elderly people need someone to go talk to and talk for them, as they don't have family living around them. Another example, it's a good concept. I never asked my provider questions because I thought she was supposed to be an expert, but now I know that nobody knows me like I do. Another really interesting example, and in interest of time, I'll hand off to my colleague here. There was an individual that said, since taking your class, I went on a personal diet. I've lost 21 pounds total and was able to consult my doctor on options. Would never have known otherwise if I didn't take this course. So again, it's providing some really nice context for what we're seeing in the data. And I'll hand it over to Jason Lemke now.
My name is Jason Lemke. I am the Development Specialist and Program Evaluator with the South Dakota Area Health Education Center. And I had my fingers in a number of areas of this grant, and I think that's probably why they have me up here kind of trying to wrap everything up for us. A couple discussion points, some bottom line takeaways from what we talked about today. As Jared mentioned, the data supported our hypothesis. And the data has also showed that this approach, the delivery model and the evaluation model, can and does work in practical application. Our educational model, we feel, holds the potential for significant positive impact on long-term individual and group health outcomes. As we mentioned, our evaluation model has held and therefore holds the potential to expand the available analytic methods for assessing the impact of a training intervention, in this case a health training intervention. Some dissemination activities that we've undertaken already and will be undertaking in the near future. Doctors Vogt and Memmott and some other members of the research team presented at the CRCAIH Summit in Bemidji this past summer. Doctors Geiger and Gutierrez presented at the National AIH Organization Conference, which was held in Charlotte over the summer. Becky and myself have had a presentation accepted at the Commission on Adult Basic Education National Conference in Denver coming up in April. That's the National Adult Education organization. An abstract has been submitted to the 40th Annual National Institute for Social Work and Human Services in Rural Areas Conference. I'm not going to pronounce that acronym, which is going to be held here in Vermilion, actually, in July of this year. And another abstract has also been submitted to the annual program meeting of the Council on Social Work Education in Denver in October of this year. Some lessons that we learned through the process. This is always a learning process, especially in pilot grants. The first thing that we came to when we were reflecting back on what we've learned procedurally is to account for contextual factors such as differences in training sites. Jared alluded to, and I believe Jay and Cassidy did also, some of the differences in delivery methods and models from site to site. Obviously, we had different instructors delivering at each site, so there's going to be inherently a little bit of difference in how the curriculum is presented from person to person. So moving forward for future projects, we're going to look at ways to account for that. Securing commitment of all key stakeholders. We had originally four delivery sites. One of our 4 sites, following the training of the instructors, our primary contact at that site went on long-term medical leave with a serious medical condition. We then moved on to working with her replacement, her interim replacement, and some of the other instructors at that site. And through staff attrition at the site and an administration change at the college that was associated with that training site, which then led to a reprioritization of staff time. That site never implemented the curriculum following the training with students. They did collect some baseline data for us from a sampling of individuals, but we lost potentially a large pool of participants there, so that was frustrating. Logistics, specifically surrounding the distribution of the research incentives. There were a couple of things. Number one, we were dealing with a participant pool that was geographically spread across the entire state. So the delivery method for those research incentives was a little bit unwieldy to get our hands around at first. We also ran into a couple hiccups in our institutional purchasing procedures because the business office at our institution had never dealt with the specific type of research incentive that we were using with the prepaid cards. So they didn't have internal procedures to deal with it, so they had to develop those before they could process our first purchases. So, you know, we didn't account for that initially. We figured, you know, it was gonna happen. One of the interesting themes that we saw as we were going through the anecdotal data was the students were asking for more content geared toward visual learners. And I know that was something that came up in the initial feedback from the trainings when Jared and Cassidy and Wyatt were out in the field training the trainers, and that was addressed, I know, in the curriculum revision, but the students wanted even more. And I don't think that would probably surprise Becky if you would ask her, you know, if that was something that was going to come up or not, because I think that's probably indicative of the adult learner population that we were dealing with. But I found that very interesting, and obviously something we're going to keep in mind going forward. Building in a formal qualitative assessment. You know, we have some good anecdotal feedback. We didn't build in a formal qualitative assessment framework to really get the most mileage out of that. So going forward in future iterations of the project, I think that'll definitely be a part of our evaluation structure. And then, of course, expect the unexpected. You know, we talked about the issues we ran into at the fourth site, the procurement and purchasing issues, and we all know that in any project there's always going to be something unexpected that comes up, and you just need to be ready to roll with the punches. And next steps. Is this me also? Okay. Moving forward, we're looking at avenues to expand the project. One possibility is to develop a partnership. We've begun conversations already with the American Indian Institute and the School of Social Work at the University of Oklahoma. We've also had preliminary discussions with the University of Kansas about developing a partnership surrounding this, as well as University of Nebraska-Omaha. We're exploring options to possibly seek funding from NIH for a 3 to 4 state project with 3 to 4 sites in each state. We've discussed moving the study to other populations, Latino, Latina, African Americans. One really interesting possibility that we're discussing, that we discussed a lot earlier today during our meetings, is working with English language learners in the South Dakota communities, which largely would be refugee populations in our communities, and that I think holds a lot of potential and promise if we can figure out the structure to do it through, and always, of course, developing more partnerships. The more people you can talk to, the more conversations you can have, the more partnerships you can build, the stronger your research network is going to be. And I'm not going to read each of the references to you. I think at this point we'll bring the rest of the team up and we will field any questions that anybody might have for us.
So at this time, if anybody, I know we'll get a sign if there's any questions from online. Just type them in your question box. I think there's a question in the audience.
So this question is for Dr. Geiger. I had a question about the perceived usefulness and ease of use.
Mm-hmm.
At baseline, how much information did the participants have about the curriculum when they were answering that at baseline?
It was just a general overview. So at that point, they hadn't seen the curriculum or the dose at that point. So it was just kind of, what do you think about this idea, this concept? So it was broad for obvious reasons, and then obviously the next measurements, it was modeled specifically to the curriculum that they already had received.
So did those change quite substantially over time?
They did, and that's where, and I'll show you the graph. Are you talking about specifically the perceived ease of use in those? Actually, I didn't test those for this presentation today. We specifically wanted to focus on patient activation. I can tell you that when I was playing around with the data, when I added perceived ease of use to the model, it substantially improved it. It significantly reduced the AIC in the growth model. So clearly, there's other pieces there. And we were talking with the methodology core earlier today about some different data analysis strategies. That's where I'd hope to move forward to really drill down, how do those concepts come into play. Again, I can tell you that perceived ease of use, it is a dramatic predictor, and it really improves the predictive ability of the model as well. So I would assume that's when you add a couple of the other pieces as well, it would continue to keep improving the model as well. Also, I didn't add any type of the sociodemographic variables into the predictive model as well. It was very, I don't want to use the word simple in the sense, I don't want to use it in a pejorative sense, but it was a very strategic question that we were testing, and we really wanted to know if there was growth over time. So we really limited it to the time factor and the patient activation. But no, it's a great question. Yeah.
I had a question on the curriculum. You talked about expanding it to other populations, and I was just wondering how much of the curriculum was developed, like culturally informed by Native American culture.
Yeah, so, well, all of the bones of the curriculum are existing resources out there that were coming from reputable sources. And that was a conversation we had today. Were you in the room when we had that conversation? Or was somebody else? Okay, I can't remember. We've met with so many different groups. But I think there are definitely elements that make it culturally competent to the American Indian population. But I think in trying to translate into other populations, it would be fairly easy to pull some of those aspects out. And we were having that conversation, and a lot of this centers around that idea of advocating for your families, becoming that health advocate. And a lot of the groups that we are thinking about working with come from collectivist cultures where that could easily translate, and kind of that theme might not be a normal piece, this idea of self-advocacy, but the idea of advocating for your family members is a huge element in a lot of the minority populations that we are looking at using. And would you guys like to add to that? Okay. Did I answer your question? Okay. Other questions?
Question. So I'm curious to know what some of the sites were. I know about one of them, but just curious about the sites across South Dakota that were used in the study or the project.
Yeah, can I defer to Becky on this? Because, the nice thing about this collaboration with Becky is she truly was that conduit where she organized and set up the trainings, and she had those connections. So I really just communicated with her, and she set everything up, but I know she intimately knows those sites.
We had two sites on the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate reservation. That was Sisseton and Enemy Swim. Both those sites are community-based organizations within the tribal system. They had strong ties to each other. Number one, those two sites did their training together, actually. They're closer geographically than our other sites. And the interesting thing there is they had strong ties to a lot of their community resources, I think. They were talking about accessing their existing wellness center resources and those kinds of things. Jason talked a little bit about the Oglala Lakota site. That one, they're an interesting location because Oglala Lakota College exists, as Cassidy said, in many clusters in that area on the Pine Ridge Reservation. So she did her training actually in Martin, I believe, but there are other smaller rural outlying centers, and I think that's why there were so many teachers at that training. It still is one of my main regrets in this project that site didn't actually get to implement the curriculum. They're one of our biggest sites among our tribal programs in South Dakota, and I would have liked to have seen them implement. I hope in future iterations maybe they'll be able to sign on again. And then in Eagle Butte, the Cheyenne River Reservation, we actually had two classrooms in Eagle Butte. It's one of those things that happens. There are two classrooms that have GED instruction literally next door to each other with two different funding sources. And those teachers worked very closely together as well. And they actually, I think that's where a lot of our numbers came from, was that Cheyenne River collective site. these are all long-standing adult education programs where these models were delivered, and experienced teachers in all of those sites as well. It's interesting. It's hard for me to think about what you might want to know about them. I know a lot of things about their teachers personally, but you know, that's just kind of an outline of who they were.
Yeah, it gives me an idea, and it sounds like most of them are GED training, or
Yes. All of those sites, all of the sites that we were looking at, they provide GED preparation, but also basic skills. So you technically can have a diploma and still attend adult education if you have a need in literacy or numeracy skills that's identified by an assessment. So, but yeah, I think almost all of our students were seeking GEDs, the ones who participated in this program. We also allowed programs to bring in people from outside of the adult education community. You did not have to be an adult education student to participate. And we did have community members from outside come in as well. And it actually had an added side benefit for our adult education programs as serving as a gateway into the adult education classroom for some people.
You're welcome. I had to add, one of the things that was, I think, exciting to us is when you're talking about the Eagle Butte community, we had made contact with one program, and then it was really instructor for another program that said, we want a part of this, we want to be a part of this. And so we're hoping that sort of word of mouth and excitement about participating in the program and seeing the potential benefits can translate to future programs. Any other questions? Well, we thank you for this opportunity, and thanks, Danielle, for setting up the meetings today. And again, thanks to CRCAIH, Sanford Health, and the NIH for your support of our project. Thanks very much.
Thank you.